The Quarth Armada emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a swarm of predatory insects descending on helpless prey. 300 warships arranged themselves in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the accumulated technology of a species that had dominated entire sectors of the galaxy for longer than humanity had possessed written language. At the center of the formation floated the command vessel of High Admiral Zorth, a massive insectoid creature whose compound eyes had watched civilizations burn human defenders. Detected, reported his tactical officer, minimal presence, conventional vessels only, no sign of the dimensional craft. Zorth's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. As expected, they believed one ship with a clever trick would be enough to protect them. Open a channel. The communication array activated, and Zoreth's image broadcast across every frequency in the system. Attention, humans. The Quarth Dominion has determined that your species poses an unacceptable threat to galactic stability. You will surrender all information regarding your dimensional technology immediately, or we will reduce your planet to ash. You have 1 hour to comply. The response came not from Earth's government, but from Captain Beak Mireille aboard the Wanderer. High Admiral, this is the vessel you came to find. Before you make any decisions you cannot take back, I suggest you look behind you. Zoreth's compound eyes swiveled toward his tactical display, and what he saw made his ichor run cold. 7 ships had appeared behind his fleet, materializing from nothing with that same reality-bending impossibility he had watched in the recordings of the demonstration. 7-dimensional vessels, arranged in a loose formation that covered every angle of approach to his armada. Impossible, he breathed. You had only one vessel. We had one vessel ready for demonstration. Mireille's voice replied. Humanity has been very busy in the months since then. We learned a long time ago that showing all your cards at once is poor strategy. The 7 vessels began to move, not through normal space, but through that strange folding reality that made them impossible to track. They appeared and disappeared around the Quarth fleet like ghosts, never in the same position twice, never staying visible long enough for weapons to lock on. You cannot hit what you cannot see. Mireille continued. You cannot defend against what can appear inside your shields. You cannot win against an enemy that fights from outside your reality. But we do not want to fight. High Admiral, we never wanted to fight. We just wanted to be respected. Zoreth's tactical officers were shouting reports. The human vessels were too fast, too unpredictable, too alien in their movement patterns for any of their weapon systems to engage effectively. 300 warships, the pride of the Quarth Dominion, and they were helpless against 8 small craft that could dance through dimensions like children playing a game. What do you want? Zoreth demanded, and he hated the weakness he could hear in his own voice. We want you to leave. Mireille said simply, go back to your territory. Tell your government that humanity is not a threat to be eliminated. We are a neighbor to be respected. We have no interest in conquest or domination. We just want to exist in peace. And if we refuse, then we will demonstrate exactly what these vessels can do when they are not holding back. Your ships will never see us coming. High Admiral, your shields are meaningless. Your weapons cannot track us. You will lose. And you will lose badly. Is that really what you want? The standoff stretched for what felt like an eternity. Zoreth's mind raced through possibilities, calculating odds, searching for some advantage he might exploit. But there was nothing. The humans had outmaneuvered him completely. Not through superior firepower or numbers, but through technology that simply made his advantages irrelevant. Then, his sensor officer's voice cut through his thoughts. High Admiral, new contacts emerging from hyperspace. Zoreth's compound eyes returned to his tactical display, and what he saw made his situation infinitely worse. The Valoric's fleet had arrived. Dozens of chrome warships led by the Eternal Blade itself, taking position alongside the human dimensional vessels. A communication channel opened, and Archon Kelvrix's grinding voice filled the Quarath command center. High Admiral Zorith. The Valoric's ascendancy formally recognizes humanity as equals under galactic law. Any attack on Earth or its vessels will be considered an attack on the Valorics, and will be responded to accordingly. Kelvrix. Zorith snarled. You would side with these primitives against the Quarath. I would side with a species that has demonstrated capabilities beyond anything we have seen in millennia, not because of their weapon, Zorith, but because of what it represents. They solved a problem we did not know could be solved. They found a door we did not know existed. That is not weakness. That is the kind of strength the galaxy needs more of. More ships began arriving. Ethery observers, their crystalline forms pulsing with energy. Smaller species who had long resented Quarath bullying saw an opportunity to stand against their oppressors, one by one. They took position in a growing coalition that surrounded the Quarath. Fleet Zorith watched his tactical display fill with hostile contacts and felt the weight of defeat settling onto his carapace. The mission had been based on a simple calculation. Humanity was weak, isolated, and could be eliminated before anyone chose to defend them. But that calculation had been catastrophically wrong. Humanity was not weak. They had simply been underestimated, and now, standing together with species that had once mocked them, they represented something the Quarath could not defeat. Withdraw. Zorith ordered finally, the word tasting like poison on his mandibles. All vessels, withdraw to Dominion space. The Quarath fleet began turning away from Earth, their formation breaking apart as they prepared to retreat. Myray watched them go, feeling the tension slowly drain from her body as the threat that had loomed over her species began to fade behind her. Navigator Shoy Yunji let out a breath she had apparently been holding for several minutes. We did it, she whispered. We actually did it. Not just us. Myray said, everyone who worked on this project. Everyone who believed in it when no one else did. Everyone who refused to accept that humanity was too weak to matter. The communication system chimed with an incoming transmission from Ambassador Yoon, Captain Beak. I have just received word from the Conclave. An emergency session has been convened to address what just happened here. Humanity's application for full membership has been placed on the priority agenda. How do you think the vote will go? Myray asked. Sioha's face broke into a rare smile. I think we will be taking our seat at the table very soon. Captain, not as petitioners, but as equals. 1 month later, Ambassador Yoon Sioha walked into the Galactic Conclave chamber for what she hoped would be the last time as an outsider. The crystalline halls that had once felt oppressive now seemed almost welcoming, and the delegates who had laughed at her first petition watched her approach with something very different in their expressions. Respect. The vote was nearly unanimous. Only the Quarath abstained, their representatives sitting in sullen silence as species after species declared their support for humanity's membership. When the final tally was announced, Sioha walked to the seat that had been prepared for Earth's representative and took her place among the powers of the galaxy. On a display screen in the Threshold Station Command Center, Dajianpar Jinho watched the ceremony with tears streaming down his face. 15 years of work, countless failures, friends and colleagues lost to experiments that went wrong, and now, finally, humanity had taken its rightful place among the stars. What comes next? Asked one of his assistants. Jinho wiped his eyes and turned back to his workstation, where plans for the next generation of dimensional vessels waited for his attention. The 7th dimension was only the beginning, he said. There are more doors to find, more questions to ask, more impossible things to discover. Humanity has learned something important. We are capable of far more than anyone ever believed. Now we get to find out just how much more. Outside the station's viewports, the stars burned with the light of ancient suns that had watched countless species rise and fall across billions of years. Humanity was just beginning its journey among those stars, but it had already proven something that the galaxy would never forget. Weakness was just another word for potential that had not yet been realized, and humanity's potential had only just begun to unfold. The emergency session of the Galactic Conclave erupted into chaos before Ambassador Yum Sioha even reached the speaking platform. Delegates shouted over each other in a cacophony of voices, mechanical sounds and telepathic projections that made her head throb with the sheer volume of conflicting emotions filling the chamber. The crystalline walls of Nexus Prime seemed to vibrate, with the tension radiating from dozens of species who had just watched their understanding of reality crumble into dust. Order! Boomed the voice of the session moderator, a massive Velorix elder whose chrome body showed the wear of millennia. The conclave will have order. The noise subsided gradually, though the air remained thick with barely suppressed agitation. As Sioha took her place at the center of the chamber, she looked out at the assembled delegates and saw something she had never seen before in their alien faces and energy patterns. They were afraid. The Quorth representative spoke first, his mandibles clicking so rapidly that the translation system struggled to keep up. This is a threat to galactic stability. The humans have developed a weapon that could destroy the balance of power that has maintained peace for millions of years. How are we supposed to defend against something that can appear inside our shields without warning? We have demonstrated a capability, Sioha replied calmly. Not a weapon. The dimensional fold drive was developed for exploration and commerce, not for military purposes. Do you think we are fools? Demanded a Velorix delegate, his voice grinding with barely contained anger. Any technology that can bypass defenses is a military technology. Your ship appeared inside the shields of our most powerful flagship. That is not exploration, that is a threat. A demonstration of capability is not the same as a threat. Sioha said, we wanted you to understand what we have achieved. We wanted you to see us as equals rather than as primitive creatures to be mocked and dismissed. How you choose to interpret, that is your decision, not ours. The Ethery Collective spoke next, their unified voice echoing directly in everyone's minds. We attempted to scan the human vessel during the demonstration. Our psychic probes could not penetrate whatever space it occupied during the dimensional transition. This is deeply troubling. The Ethery have been able to perceive all forms of matter and energy since we transcended physical form. For something to be invisible to us suggests the humans have tapped into aspects of reality we did not know existed. Sioha allowed herself a small smile at that admission. Humanity did not develop this technology by being smarter than you or more advanced than you. We developed it by asking different questions. While your species mastered the physics of normal space, we wondered what might exist beyond it. The seventh dimension was always there, waiting to be discovered. We simply had nothing to lose by looking for it. Nothing to lose? Repeated the Quorth. Your species has been part of galactic civilization for 3 centuries. You had everything to lose if your experiments had failed. 3 centuries of being told we were inferior, Sioha said. And now there was steel in her voice. 3 centuries of being laughed at in chambers like this one. 3 centuries of watching our applications for recognition being rejected because we were too young, too fragile, too weak. What exactly did we have to lose? Our pride? We were never allowed to have our place in the galaxy? We never had one. Sometimes the greatest advantage is having nothing left to protect. The chamber fell silent at her words, And Sioha could see the impact they had on some of the delegates, not all of them. The Quorth seemed unmoved. And several other species clearly viewed humanity as a threat to be neutralized rather than appear to be respected, but others looked at her with something new in their expressions, something that might have been the beginning of understanding. The session continued for hours as delegates demanded more information about the dimensional fold drive, asked about human intentions, and argued among themselves about what this development meant for galactic politics. Sioha answered what questions she could and deflected those she could not, always maintaining the careful balance between demonstrating strength and avoiding provocation. Finally, the Valaric's elder called for a recess, and the delegates began filing out to confer with their government. Sioha was preparing to return to the human delegation's quarters when a message arrived requesting her presence. At a private meeting, the location surprised the personal chambers of Archon Kelvrix himself. She found the Valaric's commander standing at a viewport that looked out over the stars, his chrome body still and silent as she entered. He did not turn to face her, but she knew he was aware of her presence. 12,000 years, Kelvrix said finally, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. I have lived 12,000 years. Ambassador, I have watched species rise and fall. I have seen technologies invented that transformed galactic civilization. I have witnessed wonders and horrors beyond anything your young species can imagine. He turned then, and Sioha was struck by something she had never expected to see in a Valaric's face: genuine curiosity. I have never seen anything like what your ship did today. The Valarics have spent 50 millennia mastering the physics of space. We believed we understood everything worth understanding, and then your primitive little vessel danced around our flagship like we were standing still. Archon, I am not finished, he said, raising a chrome hand. I came to this observation expecting to watch humanity embarrass itself. I expected to return to the conclave with evidence that your species was wasting everyone's time. Instead, I find myself asking a question I have not asked in thousands of years. How? Sioha studied him for a moment before responding. How did we develop the technology? Or how did we find the courage to try? Both. The technology came from decades of theoretical work and practical experimentation. Scientists who refused to accept that the universe had given up all its secrets. Engineers who kept trying even when experiment after experiment ended in failure. Leaders who kept funding the project even when it seemed like madness. As for the courage, she paused, choosing her words carefully. When you have been told all your life that you cannot succeed, that you are too weak, too small, too fragile to matter, you eventually reach a point where you have to make a choice. You can accept what everyone says about you, or you can decide to prove them wrong. Humanity chose to prove them wrong. Kelvrix was silent for a long moment. The Quorth departed the conclave immediately after the session. My intelligence networks report that their fleet is mobilizing. Sioha felt her stomach clench. They are coming for Earth? They have not announced their intentions, but I have dealt with the Quorth for millennia. They see your technology as an existential threat to their dominance. They will not allow humanity to exist as long as they believe you pose a danger to their power. Will the conclave intervene? Kelvrix made a sound that might have been a sigh. The conclave is slow to act in the best of circumstances. By the time they reach a decision, the Quorth fleet will already be in your home system. Sioha forced herself to breathe steadily, despite the fear rising in her chest. Then humanity will face them alone. Perhaps, Kelvrix said. Perhaps not. I find myself reconsidering many things after today. Ambassador, the Valorics have always prided ourselves on recognizing strength where it exists. I think we failed to recognize yours. He moved toward the door, then paused. The Korath fleet will take approximately 30 standard days to reach your system. I suggest you use that time wisely. Sioha watched him leave, her mind racing with the implications of what he had told her. 30 days until a fleet capable of destroying worlds arrived at Earth. 30 days to prepare a defense against an enemy that outnumbered and outgunned them by an almost absurd margin. But they had the dimensional fold drive. They had the Wanderer. And if humanity had learned anything in its short, brutal history, it was how to survive against impossible odds. She activated her communication device and began transmitting. This is Ambassador Yoon to Threshold Station. The Korath are coming. Begin production of the next phase vessels immediately. We have 30 days to get ready for war. The observation fleet hung in the emptiness between stars, like a collection of jewels scattered across black velvet. 17 vessels had gathered at the designated coordinates, representing the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. The Valoric's flagship, Eternal Blade, dominated the formation, its massive hull stretching nearly 3 kilometers from bow to stern and bristling with weapons that could crack planets like eggs. Beside it floated the ethereal forms of Aetheri observer ships, their crystalline structures pulsing with the psychic energy of the beings within. Korath cruisers held position at the edges of the formation, their insectoid crews watching everything with compound eyes that missed nothing. And now, emerging from the darkness with engines that seemed pitifully weak compared to the drives powering the alien vessels around it, came the human ship designated Wanderer. On the bridge of that ship, Captain Beak Murray watched the tactical display, with a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. They certainly showed up in force, observed Navigator Choi Yoonji from her station. I count weapon systems on the Eternal Blade alone that could vaporize a small moon. They want to intimidate us. Myre replied. They want us to see their power and tremble. They want us to know exactly how outmatched we are. And do you feel outmatched, Captain? Marie's smile widened slightly. I feel like someone who has been underestimated my entire life and has grown very tired of it. The communication system crackled with an incoming transmission, and the bridge's main display filled with the chrome face of Archon Kelvrix, Supreme Commander of the Valoric's fleet and one of the most powerful military officers in the galaxy. Human vessel. Kelvrix began, his voice carrying the grinding metallic tone common to his species. You have arrived as Vrevsdes promised. We are prepared to observe your demonstration. I advise you to make it worthwhile. The Conclave's patience with your species grows thin. Thank you for the welcome, Archon. Myre replied with carefully measured politeness. We appreciate the Conclave taking time from its busy schedule to observe. I promise you will not be disappointed. Bold words from a captain commanding a vessel that appears to be held together with primitive adhesives and optimistic thinking. Several bridge officers stiffened at the insult, but Myre only nodded as if acknowledging a valid point. Appearances can be deceiving, Archon. Shall we proceed? By all means. Show us this revolutionary technology your ambassador spoke of so confidently. Myre cut the transmission and turned to face her crew. All stations, prepare for dimensional fold. Navigator Choi, you have the coordinates? Locked and verified, June replied, her fingers dancing across her console with the precision of a concert pianist. Entry vector stable. Exit point calculated for maximum visibility to the observation fleet. Engineering. Status of the fold drive. Green across all metrics, Captain, came the reply from Chief Engineer Quandeo. Power levels optimal. We are ready to make history. Myre took a deep breath and allowed herself one moment to appreciate the weight of what they were about to do. For 3 centuries, humanity had been told it was too young, too weak, too fragile to matter. Every alien species they had encountered had looked down on them with varying degrees of contempt or pity. But that was about to change. Initiate dimensional fold. She ordered the Wanderer's drive activated, not with the dramatic flash of light that accompanied conventional faster-than-light travel, but with something far stranger. Reality itself seemed to bend around the vessel, space folding inward like origami in the hands of an invisible artist. For a fraction of a second that somehow stretched into an eternity, the ship existed in two states, simultaneously present in normal space and already gone from it. Then the Wanderer turned inside out. There was no other way to describe what the observation fleet witnessed. The ship's geometry became impossible, its angles twisting in directions that should not exist, its hull seeming to occupy spaces that were not there, and then it vanished on the bridge of the Eternal Blade. Archon Kelvrix stared at his sensor displays in disbelief. Where did they go? He demanded. Find them! We cannot, Archon, replied his sensor officer, confusion evident in his metallic voice. They have not moved to any location our instruments can detect. They have not engaged any form of drive we recognize. They are simply gone. Impossible. Nothing disappears without leaving some trace. Archon, the human vessel is not in normal space. Our sensors can find no trace of it anywhere in the observable universe. Kelvrix's chrome features somehow managed to convey shock, despite being rigid metal. In 12,000 years of existence, he had seen technologies that bent light and gravity and time itself. He had witnessed weapons that could destroy, stars and shields that could survive the heart of a supernova, but he had never seen anything simply step outside of reality. Then the Wanderer reappeared, not at the coordinates where it had vanished, but behind the observation fleet, emerging from nothing with that same reality-bending impossibility that defied every law of physics Kelvrix had ever known. They are behind us, shouted his tactical officer before anyone could respond. The ship vanished again and reappeared on the opposite side of the formation, then above, then below, then in 7 different positions in rapid succession, blinking in and out of existence like a phantom that could not be pinned down on the bridge of the Wanderer. Myre watched her crew work with practiced efficiency as Yunji guided them through a series of calculated folds that took them dancing around the alien fleet. They cannot track us, Yunji reported with obvious satisfaction. Their sensors are designed to detect movement through normal space. We are not moving through space. We are stepping around it. They literally cannot see us coming. Then let us really give them something to think about. Myre said, take us inside the Eternal Blade shields, close enough to touch. Captain, that is extremely precise navigation. Can you do it? Yunji's eyes flashed with determination. I can do it. The Wanderer folded again, and when it emerged, it was inside the protective bubble of the Valorics. Flagship shields, close enough that Kelvrix could have looked out a viewport and seen the human ship's hull with his own optical sensors, close enough that if the Wanderer had been armed with weapons comparable to the Eternal Blades, it could have destroyed the flagship before anyone could react, close enough to make a point that words alone could never convey. The Wanderer hung there for exactly 3 seconds, long enough for every sensor on every ship in the observation fleet to confirm what they were seeing. Then it vanished again and reappeared at a safe distance, floating serenely as if it had not just demonstrated the ability to bypass every defensive system the Valorics had developed over 50,000 years. Myre opened a channel to broadcast on all frequencies. This has been a demonstration of the dimensional fold drive developed by human scientists over the past several decades. This technology allows our vessels to step outside of normal space entirely, moving through the 7th dimension where your sensors cannot follow. We can appear anywhere at any time. With no warning and no way to stop us. We come in peace, but peace has teeth. The silence that followed was absolute. Every ship in the observation fleet had stopped transmitting. Their crews processing what they had just witnessed, then slowly. Channels began opening as delegates from various species demanded explanations, requested technical data, expressed disbelief that what they had seen was real on the bridge of the Eternal Blade. Archon Kelvrick sat motionless in his command chair, staring at his displays as his mind struggled to accept the implications of what humanity had achieved for 50,000 years. The Valorics had been among the most powerful species in the galaxy. Their technology had been unmatched, their military might unquestioned. Now a species that could not even survive its own sunlight, without protection, had developed something that made all of that power meaningless. What good were the mightiest shields in the galaxy if an enemy could simply appear inside them? What good were weapons that could crack planets if they could not hit a target that existed outside of reality? Kelvrix looked at the human vessel floating peacefully in the distance, and for the first time in thousands of years, he felt something he had almost forgotten was possible. He felt fear. The Threshold Station sat on the dark side of Earth's moon, hidden from casual observation by a combination of natural shadow and deliberate design. Dr. Park Jin-ho walked through its corridors with the comfortable familiarity of someone who had spent the better part of 15 years within these walls, watching a dream slowly transform into reality. Today, that dream would finally be tested. In front of an audience that wanted nothing more than to see it fail, the station hummed with activity as technicians ran final checks on systems that had no names in any alien language because no alien had ever imagined they could exist. Jin-ho passed through security checkpoints that verified his identity through 17 different methods, each one necessary because the technology housed within this facility was worth more than entire planetary economies. At the heart of the station, surrounded by layers of shielding that blocked every form of energy and radiation known to galactic science, waited the vessel designated HSV Wanderer. Jin-ho paused at the observation window and allowed himself a moment to simply look at what humanity had created. The Wanderer did not look impressive by the standards of galactic civilization. It was compact and angular where alien vessels were sleek and organic. Its hull was a dull gray metal composite, rather than the gleaming crystals and energy fields favored by the Valorics and their peers. A casual observer might dismiss it as a cargo hauler, or perhaps a primitive explorer craft barely capable of reaching neighboring star systems. That casual observer would be making a catastrophic mistake. "Still hard to believe she is real," said a voice from behind him. And Jin-ho turned to find Captain Beak Mai-Ray approaching with her characteristic ground-eating stride. The captain was a compact woman in her early 50s. Her dark hair shot through with gray and her face weathered by decades of hard vacuum and harder decisions. She had spent 20 years as an asteroid miner before joining the project, and her reputation for pulling off impossible rescues in situations that should have killed everyone involved had made her the obvious choice to command humanity's most important vessel. "Sometimes I wake up and think it was all a dream," Jin-ho admitted. "Then I come down here and see her sitting there, and I remember that we actually did it. How are the final diagnostics looking?" "Green across the board. The dimensional fold drive is stable and ready for activation. Navigator Choi has calculated our entry and exit vectors down to the quantum level. If anything goes wrong, it will not be because we were not prepared." Mai-Ray nodded and turned her gaze to the Wanderer. "The ambassador's message said the Valorics are sending the Eternal Blade. That is not just any ship, that is their flagship. One of the most powerful vessels in the entire galaxy. They want to intimidate us before we even begin. Are you intimidated? Jinho asked with a slight smile. I have faced down rogue asteroids the size of mountains while flying a ship held together with welding patches and determination. Myre replied, a fancy alien warship does not particularly concern me. They walked together toward the access corridor that led to the Wanderer's main airlock. And Jinho found himself thinking about all the years and all the sacrifices that had brought them to this moment. The dimensional fold drive had not sprung fully formed from some genius's imagination. It was the product of decades of theoretical work, countless failed experiments, and the stubborn refusal of hundreds of scientists to accept that something was impossible, simply because no one had done it before. Other species had mastered conventional physics. They had learned to bend space, to ride gravity waves, to slip through carefully calculated folds in the fabric of reality that allowed them to cross vast distances in moments rather than millennia. These were impressive achievements, and humanity had spent generations trying to replicate them, but somewhere along the way, a different question had emerged. Instead of asking how to move faster through space, someone had asked whether it was possible to step outside of space entirely. The seventh dimension had always been there, lurking in the mathematical foundations of reality like a hidden door that no one had thought to try opening. It was not a place in any conventional sense. It was more like a direction that existed perpendicular to all other directions. A realm where the rules that governed normal space simply did not apply. Getting there had required understanding physics at a level that made the collected knowledge of galactic civilization look like a child's first drawings. People had died in the early experiments. Brilliant minds had been destroyed by exposure to energies and forces that should not have existed. Resources have been diverted from a struggling civilization that could barely afford to feed its own people, let alone fund research into theoretical physics that most experts dismissed as fantasy. But humanity had persisted, because that was what humanity did. The crew was assembled and ready. Myre said as they reached the airlock, "Final briefing in 30 minutes. Then we begin pre-flight procedures. I should let you get to it." Then Jinho hesitated, then added, "Captain, I need you to understand something. What you are about to do, what this crew is about to do, it changes everything. Not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. The technology you carry will reshape the balance of power that has existed for millions of years." "I understand," Myre said, and her voice carried the weight of someone who truly did. "We are not just flying a ship. We are making a statement. We are telling every species in this galaxy that they underestimated us. And that was a mistake." The airlock cycled open, and Myre stepped through into the vessel that would carry humanity's hopes into the unknown. Jinho watched her go, then made his way to the station's command center, where he would monitor the demonstration from a safe distance. The command center was already crowded with technicians and scientists, all of them focused on displays, showing data streams that would have made no sense to anyone outside this room. At the center of the organized chaos sat navigator Choi Yoonji, her eyes moving rapidly across multiple screens as she ran calculations that would have taken conventional computers years to complete. Yoonji was young, barely 30, but she possessed an almost supernatural understanding of higher dimensional mathematics. She could visualize the seventh dimension in ways that other mathematicians could only approximate through equations. And that gift had made her invaluable to the project. "Navigator, how are we looking?" Jinho asked as he took his position at the primary monitoring station. "The entry vector is locked," Yoonji replied without looking up from her screens. "Exit coordinates are calculated for maximum impact. We will emerge at a position that their sensors cannot predict. If everything works as designed, we will give them a show they will never forget." And if it does not work as designed? Yunji finally looked up, and there was something fierce in her eyes. Then we will figure out what went wrong and try again. That is what we do. Doctor, we fail, we learn. We try again until we succeed. It is the human way. Jinho nodded, feeling a surge of pride at her words. That was exactly right. That was the quality that had allowed humanity to survive a death world. To claw its way up from nothing, to reach for the stars despite being told repeatedly that it did not belong there. The communication system chimed, and Ambassador Yoon's face appeared on the main display. The observation fleet is assembling at the designated coordinates, she reported. The Eternal Blade arrived first, which tells you how eager they are to watch us fail. The Etheri have sent a delegation as well, and several smaller species have dispatched vessels out of curiosity. The galaxy is watching. Doctor, then let us give them something worth watching, Jinho replied. He turned to the station's communication officer. Open a channel to the Wanderer, Captain Beak. You are cleared for departure. Proceed to demonstration coordinates and show these aliens what humanity can do through the observation window. He watched as the Wanderer's engines ignited with a soft, blue glow. The vessel lifted from its berth and moved toward the station's exit portal, looking small and fragile against the vast darkness of space. But Jinho knew better than anyone that appearances could be deceiving. That unassuming ship carried technology that would rewrite the rules of galactic civilization. It carried the hopes and dreams of a species that refused to accept that it was inferior. It carried the answer to every insult, every dismissal, every condescending laugh that humanity had endured since first contact. The Wanderer slipped through the portal and vanished into the void, beginning its long journey to the coordinates where the demonstration would take place. In 17 days, it would arrive at that empty patch of space where the observation fleet waited. In 17 days, humanity would show the galaxy that weakness was just another word for potential waiting to be unleashed. Jinho settled into his chair and began the long wait, knowing that when it ended, nothing would ever be the same again. The crystalline halls of Nexus Prime stretched in every direction like frozen starlight, and Ambassador Yoon Seoha walked through them with her head held high despite the weight pressing down on her shoulders. She had traveled 17 months to reach this place, crossing the vast emptiness between stars in a vessel that crawled through space at speeds the gathered aliens would consider laughably primitive. Today she would stand before the galactic conclave of ascended species and ask them to accept humanity as equals. The chamber itself took her breath away for a moment as she entered through the giant Rude, massive archway carved from a single piece of translucent crystal. Delegates from dozens of species filled the tiered seating that rose toward a ceiling so high it disappeared into soft blue mist. Some of these beings had bodies of metal that caught the light and scattered it into rainbows. Others drifted as clouds of luminous energy, their forms shifting and flowing like smoke caught in a gentle wind. Still others defied description entirely, existing in shapes that made her eyes water when she tried to focus on them directly. At the center of the chamber stood a raised platform where petitioners addressed the conclave, and Seoha made her way toward it with steady steps. She could feel their attention turning toward her like the heat of multiple suns, and she knew exactly what they saw: a small creature of soft flesh and fragile bones, wrapped in a simple diplomatic uniform that suddenly seemed inadequate compared to the crystalline armor and energy fields worn by others in this room. The representative from Earth may speak, announced a booming voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Seoha climbed the 3 steps to the platform and turned to face the assembled delegates, honored members of the Galactic Conclave. She began. her voice amplified by technology she did not understand. "I come before you today to formally request full membership in the Interstellar Accord on behalf of humanity and the planet Earth." The response was immediate, and crushing laughter rolled through the chamber in waves. Though it took many forms depending on the species producing it. The Valorics, those towering beings of living metal who sat in the most prominent section of seating, made sounds like grinding gears that conveyed their amusement. The Ethori, existing as pure thought energy, projected waves of condescending mirth directly into her mind. This is the species that requires unconsciousness for 1/3 of every rotation cycle, called out a Valoric's delegate. His chrome face somehow managing to convey a sneer, despite having no flexible features. They call it sleep. And without it, they become incapable of basic function. Their bodies cannot survive exposure to the vacuum of space for even a few moments. Added another voice, this one belonging to a Quorth representative whose insectoid form clicked and chittered with each word. They require constant intake of organic matter in specific atmospheric conditions simply to continue existing. Sioha stood her ground as the mockery continued of Valorix. Official rose from his seat and activated a holographic display that materialized in the center of the chamber. For all to see, observe the evidence we have compiled regarding humanity's home world, he announced with obvious satisfaction. The display showed Earth spinning slowly in the void, and data streams began flowing alongside the image. Their planet experiences regular, cataclysmic events including violent electrical storms, seismic upheavals, and temperature extremes that would destroy most species instantly. The world is classified as a Category 7 death world. And yet, these creatures did not simply survive there, they evolved there. This alone should tell us everything we need to know about their fundamental nature. They are accidents of evolution, barely clinging to existence on a world that tried constantly to destroy them. The laughter grew louder, and Sioha felt her jaw tighten with the effort of maintaining her composure. Furthermore, the Valorix continued, clearly enjoying himself. Humanity has possessed spaceflight capability for a mere 3 centuries. 3 centuries. The Valorix ascendancy has sailed between stars for 50,000 years. The Ethori collective transcended physical form before these creatures had discovered fire. What could such a young and fragile species possibly contribute to an alliance of civilizations that have mastered the very fabric of reality? The question hung in the air, and the chamber fell silent as every eye and sensor and psychic awareness turned toward Sioha. She took a slow breath, allowing the silence to stretch for several heartbeats before she responded. "You ask what humanity can contribute," she said, her voice calm and clear despite the anger burning in her chest. "You look at our short history and see weakness. You look at our physical forms and see fragility. You look at our young civilization and see insignificance. But you are not looking closely enough." A ripple of interest passed through the crowd, though it was mixed heavily with skepticism. Humanity has been working on something, Sioha continued, a project we call Threshold, a vessel that operates on principles no species represented in this chamber has ever mastered. The Valorix delegate, who had been leading the mockery, made that grinding gear sound again. "You expect us to believe that a species which cannot even survive its own sunlight without artificial protection has developed technology beyond our capabilities?" The Valorix have explored every corner of physics. We have bent light and gravity and time itself to our will. What could humans possibly have discovered that we have not? "Come and see," Sioha said simply. The chamber erupted into noise again, this time a mixture of laughter and outrage at her audacity. But Sioha noticed that not everyone was laughing. Some of the delegates leaned forward with what might have been curiosity. and she filed that observation away for later consideration. "You waste the conclave's time with empty boasts," declared the Quorath representative, his mandibles clicking rapidly in what she had learned was a sign of irritation. If humanity wishes to be taken seriously, it must demonstrate value, not simply claim it. "Then send observers," Sioha replied without hesitation. "Send your fastest ships and your most advanced sensors. Watch what humanity has built. And then tell me we have nothing to contribute." The Valoric's delegate exchanged looks with his companions before turning back to face her with what she interpreted as a cold smile. "Very well. Human, the Valorics will dispatch the Eternal Blade to observe your demonstration. If you are wasting our time with primitive tricks and empty promises, it will mark the end of humanity's bid for membership permanently." "Agreed," Sioha said. And she felt a small spark of satisfaction at the flicker of surprise that crossed several alien faces at her. Immediate acceptance. The session concluded with the formal scheduling of the demonstration, and Sioha walked out of the chamber with the same steady pace she had used entering. She maintained her composure through the corridors and into the small suite assigned to the human delegation, and only when the doors sealed behind her did she allow herself to exhale the tension she had been holding. Her hands trembled slightly as she activated the secure communication device hidden in her diplomatic case. The quantum entangled system connected instantly to Earth despite the impossible distance, and the face of Dr. Park Jin-ho appeared on the small screen. "Ambassador." He greeted her with obvious concern in his eyes. "How did the petition proceed?" "Exactly as we expected," she replied. "They laughed. They mocked. They showed everyone in that chamber exactly how little they think of us." "And the demonstration?" "Approved. The Valorics are sending their flagship to observe." Jinho's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile. "Then we proceed to the next phase, Ambassador. I need to inform you of a development. The Wanderer is ready. All systems have been tested and verified. We can proceed whenever you bring them home." Sioha felt her heart skip at the words she'd been waiting months to hear. "How confident are you in the drive?" "Confident enough to stake everything on it," Jinho answered. "Confident enough to change everything." Sioha nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settling around her. For 300 years, humanity had been told it was too young, too weak, too fragile to matter in a galaxy filled with ancient powers. For 300 years, they had been forced to bow and scrape and beg for scraps of respect from species that saw them as barely more than clever animals. That was about to change. "Prepare the Wanderer," she said. "I am bringing them home. And then we will show this galaxy exactly what humanity is capable of." She ended the transmission and stood alone in the quiet room, looking out the viewport at the stars that had seemed so impossibly far away for so long. Soon, she thought they would understand that weakness was just another word for potential that had not yet been realized.